What's up, rampaging tyrannosaurs of the internet? My name is Peter Ball. I am a writer, the publisher behind Brainjar Press, and this is a follow-on to a video that I did a little bit earlier, where I did a reading of a story that I wrote 25 years ago when I was 18 years old, far too obsessed with The Crow, and producing a really weird urban fantasy that I submitted as part of a university assignment. So I'm looking back at this from the vantage point of someone who has been writing for 25 years since then, and largely making my living from it. And a couple of people asked why I was so hard on that particular story, and why I was why I resorted to profanity quite a few times in the process of it. So I just want to very quickly run through some of the things that I'm looking at now as a writer and as an editor who works with manuscripts and tries to bring them up to the best possible standard, and really sort of point to some of the things that are really at the heart of where I think I was going wrong as an 18-year-old writer. So this is a little portion of the manuscript that I prepared earlier, and what you can see with these colored sections are one of the big writing mistakes that I made at that time, and I will stress that it's a big one of many, but this habit of falling into repetition. So when you first start writing, and particularly when you're writing drafts very, very fast, you can fall into this habit of reusing the same words over and over and over and over again. And as you can see, there are some really obvious ones, like I've used the word rain 6 times in the space of a page, and that's just really far more than it needs to be. Like, I haven't correctly envisioned this scene or what I want to communicate with it. But there's even just really small things. So the repetition of around as a descriptor, the repetition of Michael could see, which is kind of both a problem because it's a repetition, but also because in doing that, I've taken Michael, who's our point of view character, and even though it's a third person point of view, it's a very close third person point of view, Michael's attention is guiding what's going on in this story and showing us what's important because he's paying attention to it. So when we do things like Michael could see, and we do this, we actually engage in this process that Jeff Vandermeer in his book Wonder Book refers to as divorcing the brain from the body. We very rarely wandering around in our own lives going, oh, I can see this thing. We see it and we process it. And when you put things like such and such could see, you create a sort of cognitive dissonance within the story, because you are creating a distance between what's actually important and what's there. Seeing is not a verb that really should be getting a lot of play within the story. Other repetitions here. Ran as a verb, which is both a very weak verb to be using, but also just with its small repetition. The repetition of glow, I'm trying to describe something, and because I've not got a really firm grip on what the description is, it hasn't actually, I've just, like with the rain, I've reverted back to just going again and again, rain, glow, rain, glow. I really want you to know it's raining. I really want you to know it's glowing. I really want you to know it's dark. I really want you to know that Michael is a grimdark character with a sword and a sword and a trench coat. Again, far too many viewings of The Crow at the age 18 for young me. There's also just other things. So this repetition of the phrase of the city is something that leaps out to me now. It's, again, my influences are showing. You have space, these kind of urban fantasy spaces and urban fantasy films, which were becoming really prominent when I was 18. So you had The Crow, and you had movies like Dark City and all these kinds of, let's push fantasy into a contemporary space. And I was also playing a lot of Vampire the Masquerade at the time. I was, really just kind of into this idea of the city as a generic setting, particularly because as a young kid, I was growing up in the Gold Coast, Australia, which is very, very far away from a lot of the settings that I was seeing in film and fiction at the time. So it was kind of, this was not a real city that Michael was inhabiting. It was this kind of ambiguous city that I was kind of hoping to invoke without actually giving any kind of details. I'm sure in my head I thought this story was very much set in like New York brownstones and high rises with Gothic gargoyles, none of which actually resembled the environment that I was living in at the time. The Gold Coast was a much newer, much weirder kind of city that really trended towards concrete and glass as its design motifs. So these are the kinds of things that start leaping out at me really, really quickly when I look at this, and it's a real sign that the writing has not been polished. It's not been carefully considered to figure out what the intent is and how to really hone that intent. But that's not the only thing. So I'm just going to quickly remove all those colorings. And let's look at this first line. Michael crouched low on the rooftop, the large sword that he held in his hand, turning the torrential rain to mist as it touched the silvery blade. So I'm just going to highlight that one while we focus on it. And you can tell I do not use the highlight function all that often in Word. So there's a couple of reasons why this doesn't really work as a description. So I'm going to create a bit of distance here, and I'll talk you through it as I make the change. So Michael crouched on the rooftop. I'm still not thrilled with that as an opening, but at least it's what it has going for it. It has a transitive verb. I'm still not thrilled with this description, but it does have a couple of things going for it. It gives us it gives us an immediate sense of who Michael is. He's someone engaging in skullduggery. Crouched is, I don't hate it as a verb, but I'm looking at it now going, there was probably something better that could be here. But let's look at this problem. So the large sword that he held in his hand, turning the torrential rain to mist as it touched the silvery blade. So there's a lot of information being conveyed in that part of the sentence. But the question that I'm asking myself now is, what is actually necessary there? So let's look at the obvious. He has a very large sword that he's holding in his hand, right? That's, there aren't many places where people hold swords. It's either going to be in his hand or it's going to be in the scabbard. So that's that's six words of detail that aren't really necessary there. We can cut that. Okay, so second, again, we're back in Michael's point of view. Now, here's the thing that I asked myself as, 25 years on is, I'm signifying that the large sword is large for the reader, but I'm in Michael's perspective. Does he wander around going, this sword is very, very large? And the second problem is large is a terrible descriptor. When I say the word large, what am I thinking? Is it, are we talking about, are we talking about an oversized Final Fantasy VII style sword? Are we talking about a two-handed sword or some kind of very large claymore blade? There's all these kinds of details that are very ambiguous because large is not a real concrete kind of verb. So even with just that, we can cut this down to Michael crouched low on the rooftop, his sword turning the torrential rain to mist as it touched the silvery blade. That's, I'm still not 100% happy with it, but I'm looking at it going, okay, it's already better than it was. It has a greater sense of rhythm to it. It's got a lot of the superfluous detail, because what I really want you to know in that opening is, dude skulking on rooftop, big magic sword, probably on fire. So let's look at, can we refine this? Can we refine this further? Silver. I'm typing around a microphone, so I'm slightly. So his silver sword turning. So that lets me get rid of the silver. So, Michael crouched low on the rooftop, his silver sword turning the torrential rain to mist as it touched. I don't even need that. So, already just a huge amount of words cut down. Michael crouched low on the rooftop, his silver sword turning the torrential rain to mist. So, there are still issues here because here's a really useful tip. Always read your work aloud once you've done the early draft, because it'll start showing up all sorts of problems. And you can probably hear it when I'm reading this. Michael crouched low on the rooftop, his silver sword turning the torrential rain to mist. Right? So there's a lot of alliteration in that opening sentence. So let's go. His unsheathed sword turning the torrential rain. His unsheathed sword turning the torrential rain to mist. I still don't like the turning the torrential to rain, but I can't think of anything better while I'm doing this. So, yeah, that's still ugly. I'm still not a fan of it, but it's like, this is an ongoing process. That's already so much better than it was. And here's the other thing, one of the cardinal sins of an opening is if you take out the internal monologue from this scene, if you take out the descriptions of all the things Michael does and envision it as, what would this actually be like in real life? Basically what we have for the space of a page, and time is a really weird process in fiction. Like, films love this kind of opening. Here's our protagonist crouched on a rooftop watching things happen down below. But the thing with film is it will get this done inside of 3 seconds. You can establish all of this in a shot because the character is within that scene. And because it's a big visual medium, we take in a lot of detail at once. In fiction, we are adding the detail one word at a time. So, that 3-second scene, that moment, which if it was a movie, would consist of point the camera at the guy on the rooftop, show the steam rising off the blade, show that little flash of white glow in his eyes to alert us to the fact that he's supernatural. That's a 3-second shot. In a page, it takes you much longer than 3 seconds to get there. And basically what Michael does that entire time is stand stock still, getting rained on, while holding a sword. And, nothing really external happens there. We don't know why he's doing this. If I was legitimately going to rewrite this, this is an exercise in editorial, then I would be skipping back. I would not be using this as my starting point. I would be going back and going, okay, there is more to be done here. I can contextualize this very differently, because I don't want to be showing Michael standing still for no reason. I want Michael to be crouched on the rooftop for a reason. I am standing here. So I would probably even go, Michael stood vigil. Michael stood vigil on the rooftop, his unsheathed sword, turning the torrential rain to mist. Right? Suddenly that gives him purpose. He's not just crouched there. He is standing guard. And that's a stronger verb. It gives that opening a lot more weight, and you can get a sense of momentum running from it, right? Turning the torrential rain from mist. I don't need this second reference to rain here. What I'm trying to convey, I think, it's been 25 years, is that he's been there for a very long time. But, there are little things that crop up. Why is the heat from his sword turning rain to mist around him, but it's not keeping his arm dry? How hot is it? There are all sorts of supernatural ecology questions that that are coming up. And why is he choosing to get damp rather than seek cover? Why has he chosen this particular place, to hang out? So, right, let's go. Shirt, jeans, small rivers off the back of his leather jacket to pull around his feet. None of this works. I'm just going to cut it. No, I'm not. So Michael stood vigil on the rooftop, his unsheathed sword turned torrential rain to mist. Living. Breathing. No, that's not going to work either. This is a hard one. This is harder than I thought it would be. So let me move on. He studied the ebb. Pedestrians. Yeah, on Hale Street. What I'm going to, instead of launching into the description here, I'm going to double down on this idea of we're giving Michael things to do. He's standing vigil on a rooftop, the unsheathed sword turning the torrential rain to mist. He studied the ebb and flow of the scurrying pedestrians on Hale Street, searching out. Searching for this familiar stain. Familiar stain of tarnished souls. Amid the chaos. All right. Michael stood vigil on the rooftop, his unsheathed sword turning the torrential rain to mist. He studied the ebb and flow of scurrying pedestrians on Hale Street, searching for the familiar stain of tarnished souls amid the chaos of the downpour. Right, so that already gets us an awful lot of what that opening chapter was doing in a page, compressed into the space of about a paragraph. Rather than the city, we have a very specific place, and it doesn't matter if we don't know what Hale Street is. Michael knows what Hale Street is. He gives us a sense of location. So when we start describing it, there is an implicit contract with the reader. I can start giving details of all these kinds of things. It also means that I'm taking the visual description of his, I'm going to watch humanity's souls and see the evil of the city, and making it a active thing. He is doing this for a reason, not just to show off the fact that he is a supernatural creature, but he is standing vigil and he is doing something specific. So that gives us an awful lot more impact than that original paragraph was that original paragraph was going to get us. I go ahead and think about this. I'll probably do another version of this this breakdown, but tune in again. We will see how this goes.